So good morning, everyone. My name is James Taylor. I'm with Franklin Associates. We're a consultant to TBG Partners, who has been retained by BREC to assemble a team of planning and environmental consultants to investigate the property of Airline Highway Community Park, also known as the Baton Rouge Fairgrounds, and to develop a master plan for the future use of this property. And so this is the second of a series of stakeholder group meetings to begin this discussion. The purpose of this is for us to provide you with a brief presentation of what the consultant team has learned so far, and then really to ask you a series of questions and collect input and guidance from you. This is leading up to a public engagement event, which normally would have been a public meeting in person. With the current circumstances, that also will be some sort of an online forum with online polling and online engagement tools. So with that, I'm going to switch over and share my screen and introduce Will Jones, who is the leading principal with TBG Partners. And
Thanks, James. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending our second stakeholder meeting for Airline Highway Community Park. We're excited to lead the project with a fantastic group of consultants that we've assembled. And again, thank you, Brett, for the opportunity to be a part of this project. Our team consists of a number of consultants. As James mentioned, TBG is the prime landscape architect of the project. Myself, as well as Jody House, is on the line. We also have SCAPES, who is a partner in landscape architecture, on the team, and we have Chris Barnes and Liz Community on the line as well. Franklin Associates, as James mentioned, is our public engagement consultant. And so James, I think Perry Franklin is on the line as well. CSRS out of Baton Rouge is leading our civil engineering and H&H modeling. We've got Rome office as our architectural sub-consultant, SURA as a cultural resource and archaeology consultant. Coastal environment from an ecology standpoint will be helping assist us. And we have ETM, who's going to be advising on really park operations and maintenance strategies, revenue generation, as we start to develop the master plan and the framework for the park. So with that, I was going to turn it back over to you, James, to give a little an overview of where we are today in terms of the content that we've developed. We've been working for the past month on really kind of the discovery inventory phase of the project. This is it's a three-phase master planning process, and James will click on that here in a minute when we look at the schedule. But what we've developed to date is content that is focuses really on kind of the uses, the history, the environmental component, the hydrology component, as well as a few other things that we'll share with you all. One of the items that we're still working on is the cultural resource report that SURA is. They're actually doing some field investigations right now for us, and we've just received actually an environmental report from coastal environment that really kind of touches on the flora and fauna that exist on the site. So with that, I think, James, I'm going to pass it back to you to give kind of an overview of project timeline and the content that's been developed to date, and then we'll open it up for Q&A at the end of the call.
okay, thank you, Will. Everybody can hear me. If you can't, please reach out and let me know. There's a chat box function. You can leave your comments there as well. So as Will spoke about, this is the project timeline here. This is a quick 5-month planning process. We are now in the second of a total of 4 stakeholder meetings. It will be leading up to this first public meeting event, which would be an online event, likely occurring in early September, then additional stakeholder meetings, and then culminating in a final draft master plan presented at a public hearing. So we have a series of approximately 20 slides here to go through. The design and environmental consultants have been busy collecting information about the project site, and we wanted to begin with this general update. So first, everybody understands where the project is located here in the southern edge of East Baton Rouge Parish on the border with Ascension Parish. So Bayou Manchac flows into the Amite River and forms the boundary between East Baton Rouge and Ascension parishes, and also Iberville Parish further to the west. Ward Creek drains a large percentage of urban Baton Rouge and flows into Bayou Manchac here at this point, and then drains into the Amite, which flows into Lake Maurepas, then Lake Pontchartrain, and eventually out into the Gulf through the Mississippi Sound. So right through here across the center of the screen is US 61 Airline Highway. Everybody's familiar with the site. And so this is the site. There are low points and lower areas along the water courses, as you're well aware of. These are subject to inundation during flood events. There are high points on the property that many of which, especially those up along Airline Highway, did not flood during 2016. This property is across the Ward Creek from another BREC property, the Santa Maria Golf Course, which is, of course, built out with a private development, the Santa Maria Country Club. This graphic shows the slope analysis of the property. So areas up here are flatter and higher, and these are the tops of the points within the property. The blue areas are the lowest spots here. This interesting area here we've discovered is a former meander of Bayou Manchac. So the remnants of that are evident from the research. So looking at from a broader perspective, our site here is along Airline Highway at the boundary of Ascension Parish. And so we have the Ward Creek watershed comprising about 46 square miles. Then we have a portion of the Bayou Fountain, Bayou Manchac watershed that is in East Baton Rouge Parish, and it extends over here to the east or a little bit. This also coincidentally is an additional 46 square miles. And then of course you have much of the watershed on the southern boundary of Bayou Manchac, draining from Spanish Lake through Alligator Bayou into Bayou Manchac here at the area known as the confluence. So that's an enormous amount of water all flowing right past this park site. Zooming in a little bit, we're showing this park site right here in the center, and we've got Bayou Manchac draining past it towards the Amite, and Ward Creek draining down from Baton Rouge into Bayou Manchac. And of course, the Amite River to the east flows into Lake Maurepas. This analysis of the floodplain shows the lower areas that are subject to inundation. It also calls out the location of the current oxidation pond that provides septic and sanitary treatment to the restrooms there on the site. And zooming in, this has, looks like I've got, trying to clean up the waiting room here, sorry. There are a number of areas of the property here that are in, this shows areas inundated during the 2016 flood. And SCAPES, one of our consultants on the team, oh, I guess it's the next slide. This shows some of the aerial photos of the flooding that occurred in 2016. around the park property and all around the warehouse that exists there storing state fair equipment. And another view of that flooding event. This here on the right is a view of what the Bayou Manchac typically looks like when you're paddling down it. So SCAPES did this analysis following data from the 2016 flood. And you can see here in the top left in day 1, this was the extent of flooding on the property. Day 5, it appears that much of the floodwaters had receded to an extent, but then by day 7, you experienced backwater flooding from the Meat up Bayou Manchac and back into this area. So that it wasn't until day 13 that again, the floodwaters receded. And so we know from the history of Bayou Manchac that backwater flooding from the Meat is a continuous threat. So as I began this project, I did some research. I read Marianne Sternberg's book, Winding Through Time, which is a very interesting read. There are historical markers there on the site, just denoting the presence of the William Bartram Trail and also the use of this corridor by Iberville and his men as they traversed and took a shortcut rather than following the Mississippi River out through the Birdfoot Delta. They returned after consulting with the local Bayou Gula tribe, who informed them of this back way to the Mississippi Sound, where their boats were anchored there at Ship Island. So this is sort of a web map that I did to identify points of historical interest, including the Klein Peter site. And then over here on the right, there's the ill-fated settlement of Galvez Town, which was threatened and eventually succumbed to repeated flooding. Zooming in on the side a little bit, it's a different view of historical accounts here. So again, Iberville was following up on the work of his predecessor Bienville by finding the true mouth of the Mississippi River, and he took the shortcut back along Bayou Manchac, fighting his way through this western end of it until he reached the confluence, and then presumably from the confluence of Bayous Fountain and Alligator Bayou and Ward Creek, then the bayou deepened and broadened and made it more passable out to the Amite River for he and his crew. Also, we know that William Bartram, our naturalist who was hired by interests in London, traversed the South immediately prior to the American Revolutionary War. He stayed primarily in the southern states and ended up finalizing his journeys here right in Baton Rouge. So he traveled up the Amite River and disembarked there at the mouth of Bayou Manchac and walked on land alongside the trail along the bayou and presumably got up to the fort site and the settlement of Baton Rouge and proceeded into the Felicianas a little bit before returning the way he came. Also, we know that at the Country Club of Louisiana, prior to its development, at the Klein Peter site, there is the presence of Indian mounds, middens right there. We also learned that there are some additional mounds here at Kings Ferry, the crossing there at the corner of Santa Maria. Other things of interest, our current primary mode of travel is Interstate 10, linking Baton Rouge and New Orleans. Before that, we traveled on US 61, Airline Highway. And before that, we used Old Jefferson, which before it was a paved road and before there was a bridge, we had Hampton's Ferry right here. So this was a very important trade and transshipment point for the settlement of all of Baton Rouge and really the southeast portion of the parish. We had the establishment of Hope Villa, which expanded to occur on both banks, north and south of the bayou, and many other interesting activities occurred in this area with steam-powered vessels plying the Amite River, linking New Orleans through Lake Pontchartrain and Maurepas and the Amite River up Bayou Manchac to this junction with Ward Creek, which was in fact dredged and widened to turn it into a turning basin to serve these steam-powered vessels. So the Santa Maria plantation here had a wharf, of course, and that's where goods and perhaps livestock and people were transshipped right there. So there's a lot of interest here in the historical significance of this park and of the bayou that's adjacent to it, which served as an international boundary at 2 points in its history. So an additional map of interest is the current land use. We've got that for East Baton Rouge Parish. Don't yet have that for Ascension, but as you can see, the site is fronted by US 61, and which has commercial and light industrial facing it. And then behind that are single family residential, and on the other side of Ward Creek, Santa Maria's additional single family residential. So BREC assets in the area include this Airline Highway Park. You've got the Santa Maria Golf Course and Santa Maria Park. You've got Manchac Park just a little bit downstream from along Bayou Manchac. There's also further to the east is the Kindlewood Road Preserve property, which has frontage on Bayou Manchac. You've got other smaller neighborhood parks, including the Eric Sternberg Family Park, Brookfield Avenue Park, and then in Ascension Parish, there's Oak Grove Community Park, which is obviously not a BREC facility. So we were also experiencing in East Baton Rouge Parish the movement for the establishment of the city of St. George. And so what this graphic produced by BREC staff identifies is in the blue area, these are the boundaries of this proposed city of St. George. BREC assets within that boundary are highlighted in light green, and they are listed here on the right. In bold is Highland Road Community Park, which is the only community park fully within this boundary of St. George. Also Forest Park right here, where my little laser pointer is another community park, and it is adjacent to the boundary, but not within it. So both of these are the nearest community parks serving this area. All of the others are either special use, such as the golf course and the Kindlewood Preserve, or they are neighborhood parks. And of course, Burbank Soccer Complex has mixed uses. It has a playground, but also, and a dog park, but also primarily as a special use soccer facility. So from prior to 2004, BREC's primary focus was on neighborhood and special use parks. And then in 2004, they went through a system master planning process for the recreation throughout the parish. And that was the Imagine Your Parks strategic plan. Outcomes from that plan included the need to focus on investing in community parks, which are intended to offer enhanced services to a larger area of population and to serve more people. That was reiterated in 2014 with Imagine Your Parks 2, when this strategic plan was updated. And what is revealed is this southeast corner of East Baton Rouge Parish is underserved by a community park. They don't have close access to a community level BREC park, as denoted by these red dots. That indicates a service gap. Site circulation of the Airline Highway Park. Obviously, this is Airline Highway cutting across, and we have 3 access points from Airline Highway, 2 of them via this frontage road into the park. All of the circulation within the park, I believe, is all gravel roads. There are a number of areas north and south identified as the parking areas, typically serving the large capacity of parking needed for the state fair. Also, the city parish has been successful in applying to FEMA for funding to construct a safe house or a safe room. This facility will house people during emergencies such as hurricanes, tropical storms, or other types of emergencies. Also, in times of non-emergency, will serve as a community center for this area of the parish. These are renderings produced by WHLC architects as part of the application for this facility to FEMA. So this gives you an idea of the caliber of the facility that's being considered here.
Hey, James, just real quick, the
Yes,
safe
sir.
room, when in the rare occasions it serves as a safe room, it's not intended to be a shelter, but more of a sort of a command center for
Okay.
emergency personnel and staging. So I just want to make that.
Okay. Thank you, Rita. Good clarification there. So we also looked through some historical records. This is a topographic map of the park site, and you can see this landfill location designated here in this corner. It also appears here in this historic air photo. So we know of the existence of this landfill, which we also understand has been studied, and it was capped and sealed according to DEQ guidelines and requirements, and the studies have revealed that is in full compliance. So the State Fair, as we mentioned, is a major user of this facility. They're actually, the organization actually owned the property prior to BREC. They sold it to BREC. So this is an air photo of how the midway is laid out, and parking to the north and overflow parking would be to the south there. So some images here on the right of what the State Fair looks like. And just a few more images of how the State Fair looks. And this is a diagram of showing how things are laid out on the property with the carnival and the pavilions and the midway and all of that. And the north and the south parking lot are also of importance. So programs of uses on the site currently, obviously it's the home of the Baton Rouge State Fair. There's also an air gun range for practice and actually national events. We have a very active local air gun club, and their members are represented on this call, and we look forward to hearing from them. Smaller events that occur on this park include family reunions, picnics, company outings, parties. Larger events include festivals and concerts, fun runs, charity events. Their cross-country meets have been held on this property. They're also held at nearby Highland Road Community Park, but as one of my sons has been a competitor in those meets, I can attest that that park is in dire need of parking for that event. It is tough to find parking safely for that event. Baseball practices and games, including league play, have been occurring here at Airline Highway Park. Also soccer, lacrosse, and football practices. ATV training courses have been set up and used for new owners of ATV vehicles to promote safety. Cricket matches have occurred historically, although they are now relocating to another BREC site. So with that, we're going to move to the discussion portion, and I'm going to turn it back over to Will. We've seeded this discussion with about 8 questions that we'll run through, but certainly it's open to comments and questions from everyone.
Thanks, James. And just as a reminder, feel free to incorporate any questions that you have via the group chat feature, or you can certainly ask them via audio as well. So you've got multiple scenarios. The first question we have is, what do you believe the biggest opportunities for the site are? And I know that, James prefaced, through the content that he communicated. Obviously, there's a rich history here. There's major environmental sensitivity that we've got to be aware of. There's the current program uses of the State Fair, the Air Gun Club. So there's a lot of facets as we start to dig into the development and the framework and master plan of this park. And so we asked this group, what do you guys see as the biggest opportunities for the site?
Well, hi guys, this is Kerry from the President of Bayou Air Gun Club. We've been contacted, a lot of people aren't aware because we haven't pursued it since the COVID, but I did get several calls from the VA out of New Orleans, Veterans Administration. And they want to come out and look at our air gun range for the disabled veterans and veterans that aren't disabled, area for them to shoot air guns. A lot of them still like to shoot, but they don't like the big boom of, you know, powder burner guns anymore. So they're looking at this possible site to, you know, enhance a veterans program. Of course, we welcome that, but they haven't been out yet because they're waiting on the COVID, something to happen with it. Last year we had, well, every April we have a national event, the Cajun Spring Nationals. And we usually limit that to 90 shooters. Last year we had the U.S. Nationals, people from around the world, Puerto Rico, South Africa, all over the U.S. And we had to limit that to 120 shooters due to just the range configuration, you know, to get people in and out. So, you know, what we're really looking at is some type of upgrade for where you can get handicap accessible bathrooms, place where you can get wheelchairs in and out. That's hard to do with the gravel and stuff. You know, I don't know if we are able to enlarge the range any. I don't know what the overall game plan is. I know today we had at the range, there was guys doing soil samples out there. You know, I'm sure they're gonna find some lead because that range has been there for 31 years, shooting lead pellets. So another thing is y'all talked about the flooding. During the 2016 flood, there was, where the range is, there was almost 9 foot of water. Two of the members, we call it the clubhouse. It's really a storage building. And they basically had to go in and rework the whole building. But the water come up to the covered shooting area, to the top of it. So that's almost 9 foot.
Yeah, and that was just the front area of it. The back was deeper because it slopes down towards the back of the range.
Yeah.
Right.
And yeah, we had a lot of flooding in March of that year too for the Cajun Classic. When we arrived Friday to start setting up, water was knee deep at about the 30-yard point of our range because there was that little flood in March that year too.
Yeah. As far as overall of the park, I mean, like you mentioned, the cricket guys, but they're going to be locating. You know, baseball is a big thing. There's no things like basketball facilities or tennis courts. Another thing I do, and I know a lot of people, especially older people, participate in this this thing called cricket. Pickleball. That's a big upcoming thing. I know some of the BREC parks indoors, they have pickleball ranges, but I'm not aware of any outdoor courses for pickleball. And you can probably double the tennis court. You know, use double usage on the tennis court, just different line markings. But now I think there's an archery facility pretty close to that, to Airline Park. You know, that would be another thing. I think Highland Road Park they don't have the archery out there anymore. Might have moved it to Antioch or something. I'm not really sure. But, you know, that's kind of my 2 cents right here at the early stages, just kind of make everybody aware of things that, you know, people from around the country, they want to come here to shoot because we have kind of a unique range. The two ranges in the woods and stuff we call bell tear and lanyap. That's, you know, we kind of keep it as growed up as possible, and so it gives a, you know, a hunter experience in the woods. And that's kind of like what the veterans people kind of, besides just going out and shooting, you know, to be able to compete in a field target match and actually go through the woods. So that's about what I got right now.
Great. No, I think that's great information, Terry. Thank you.
Okay.
And you know, go ahead.
Okay, Nathaniel Klum, Paddle BR. As far as the opportunities for the site, I'm obviously particular to water access, because this site is, well, it's about 6 miles downstream from Highland Road Park. It's on Bayou Manchac, which has Manchac Park, which will be, you know, having access. There is some access farther down Bayou Manchac on the Ascension side, but having Blueway access on Ward Creek would be a tremendous advantage, both for people that want to, you know, have the experience of starting at one park and going to another, but also because Ward Creek is, Bayou Manchac tends to have more current after rain events, and the current lasts longer. And so going from Manchac Park, people could launch from there and paddle around, but they'll have to be fighting a current. Whereas because of the hydrology, Ward Creek gets a strong current right as there's a major rain event, but then it becomes still much more quickly. So I recently led a Boy Scout troop. We paddled up against the current from Manchac Park vicinity. And once we got to Ward Creek, then it became a lot more fun for them because of just the way the water flows. So I saw the proposed Blueway, you know, site on one of the slides, and making sure that that does end up on the Ward Creek part of, and not on Bayou Manchac, will make it much more useful for your less skilled, more recreational users.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thanks, Nathaniel. I guess one question just in regards to, you know, users of the current kind of Blueway system is, Nathaniel, do you know, is there a count, or how active are people paddling on Bayou Manchac, Ward Creek, and just kind of the regional Blueway system that exists today?
Okay, basically on Bayou Manchac, I do see people and hear people out there occasionally, but because the only ways to access it are from steep banks at either the Alligator Bayou locks or at some of the parks, there are steep banks that you can get in. It only gets the advanced users. The Highland Road Park launch, there is traffic out there all the time. I have never been out on a non-storming day and not seen more than half a dozen or more users. Everything from your standard college students to families out in multiple canoes with their little kids. So having the easier entry and exit seems to be extremely important for getting just the full population that you could have out on them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it seems like the Highland Road launch is definitely approachable and seems to be user friendly just by looking at it. And James, I think we saw that there's actually a launch across Ward Creek over at Santa Maria. Is that correct?
There is. That is a private launch, and based on yesterday's conversation, it's going to become even more private.
And just to, since I mentioned it yesterday and I see there are some new people, if there's going to be a consideration for a launch for kayaks or something, we should probably definitely consider something along the back portion of the range saying that this is a shooting range, do not stop or enter this area, since we had that issue that one year where the kids had crossed the creek and came up into the range while we were shooting. And because we shoot in the woods, we didn't see them till they crossed into an actual shooting line. So we would definitely need something there that warns people.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely important to consider as we dig into the planning. Thank you for that.
This is Michelle Desitel. I thought now might be a good time to break in and talk a little bit about Bartram, since we're talking about paddling. And Bartram sites do tend to bring a lot of people to visit them, and a lot of the people who come are paddling enthusiasts who are also highly skilled. So just to take into account that we do need to service our entire community, but if we also want to encourage visitors from outside the community and the dollars that they bring in, we may need to consider that they are interested in more challenging canoeing and kayaking. And while I'm here, just let me go ahead and talk a little bit about Bartram. I appreciate the history that you provided. I want to point out that there are not many recreational facilities of the caliber that we have here that also have the opportunity to talk about the history of Louisiana, the history of the United States, the flora, the fauna from that time period and what we have today, and the connection to science that Bartram had, and that actually places and locales in the South, including Louisiana, including our area, provided. Manchac was a trade route between countries. It was incredibly important from an economic point of view, strategically important from war point of view, military. And the story just goes on. And so I think it would be nice to consider that in interpreting the park, in making some celebration of its history. We don't have that much of an opportunity to do those things, and would provide a benefit to a lot of the people who are residents of our area now, who may not be familiar with its history or its role in history. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. That's great. And we 100% agree that there's, the site and adjacencies are certainly rich in history, and think that presents certainly an educational, opportunity, to your point, and in terms of really kind of incorporating more of an interpretive piece to the park. So that's something that I think we certainly want to celebrate as we move into kind of the park planning. I guess one question, just in terms of the travelers and the visitors that are Bartram followers, do you have any data on where these visitors are coming from, and how many are coming a year? That might be helpful in us just understanding, the attendance and the guests, the visitors per year. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And I cannot provide that data for Louisiana. We are just in the beginning of marking a lot of the spots here that are associated with Bartram, but we can look at other states, Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, Alabama, who are very active in promoting Bartram, and actually do take counts at their state parks, local historic sites, etc., about folks who are coming in related to Bartram. And they know that Bartram is a big attractor. They have folks that follow his trail, people who canoe where he traveled by canoe. There are hiking trails elsewhere along his path where he walked. We also know that he has a big following in Europe, and that a lot of Europeans will come to the United States and actively look at particular sites that Bartram was associated with. We don't really realize that the book that he wrote was a bestseller for literally dozens of years in Europe. It influenced many other prominent writers, and many of the great gardens of Europe were planted with plants that were bought from the Bartrams. John, who is William's father, and William through the years, which is one reason if you look at photos of Kew Gardens and grand European gardens and you see magnolia trees and other southern plants, you go, huh? And you are seeing plants that are collected from seed here in the southern eastern part of the United States. But anyway, back to the point, I can't give you that data now because we are just beginning with locating and marking places in Louisiana, but I think we could get some input from some other states, and I can reach out to some of them and see if they have data. And if I can get that, I will be happy to provide it to you.
Hey, Michelle.
Right.
You also might want to point out that just a few years ago, Baton Rouge hosted the Bartram Conference, which brought in people from, do you have any idea how many people you brought in for that?
Well, that one was our first conference. It was a very small one because didn't know that if we could ramp up to handle a huge one since it was our first. So we had a attendance of maybe about 150 folks or so. And I want to point out that these are scholarly conferences. So they usually result in a collection of publication of the writings and the presentations that people make at these conferences. Most of them are currently published by the University of Georgia Press, I think. It would be wonderful one day if perhaps another university could also share in some of that. But they bring families with them. So even though the folks attending these conferences, you have a number for that, you also have to recognize there's an additional extended number of people who are coming to enjoy the amenities of the area at the same time. So I think hopefully we'll be hosting it again in about 4 or 6 years.
Well, this is Brandon. I wanted to mention during that conference, we also did an unveiling of a Bartram trail marker at Magnolia Mound. So we can potentially find some data there of how many people have visited, or specifically have visited to see the Bartram trail marker and visit Magnolia Mound during that 2-year period of time.
Thank you.
Yeah, that would be great, Brandon. We'd love to see that information.
So that marker exists now, Brandon?
Yes, it does exist now.
And to that point, I just want to, the marker locations that I've been, that turned up in my little research was there's one there at Airline Park. There's one at Magnolia Mound. There's one in downtown Baton Rouge. There's one at Hilltop Arboretum. And there's one at the Burden Plantation.
And the line.
Excuse me, there's also one in Zachary,
Okay.
in the Plains area, which
Yes.
Bartram did investigate. And there is one at Point Capee near the river, where he crossed the Mississippi River at that time, an international boundary, to visit the village of Point Capee. And that was actually the end of his trip. So we have the furthest west he went is in Louisiana. Well, in Louisiana, although it was Spanish territory at the time. And then he turned around and he went back to Philadelphia.
There's a marker at the Goodwood Library as well.
Yes, the library marker is actually the first marker that was in the region. It was one that we call our lost and found marker. It had been removed and put into storage, and we were delighted to find it and bring it back home to Baton Rouge. And we were very tickled that the library consented and to have it placed on their property, which is very near, actually within a block of its original location.
I did want to mention too, so we have had some discussions about some other potential park locations, and maybe internally, BREC can just kind of figure out how those might all tie together now that we have trails at Manchac and Kendallwood as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. James, seems like this might be a good time to go to the next question, which basically kind of, the adverse of the first question is, what do you believe the biggest challenges of Airline Highway Community Park or the site kind of present itself today? I know that, we talked a lot about the hydrology and the flooding and the inundation that occurs on the site. We heard yesterday from the State Fair constituents that, infrastructure is limited on site. We've heard parking, power, infrastructure in general is limited. And I think we heard a little bit of that from the Air Gun Club as well. Are there any other challenges that, this group can voice or comment on that would be helpful in really the development of the master plan?
I think after hearing Carrie talk about the VA and the disabled vets, I know for at least the air gun range in the back, but from what I've seen of the whole park in general, it's just making it more handicap accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Because, everything's gravel out there and uneven grass and,
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's definitely something that, we'll certainly take into account is just, accessibility in general. And so that's something that'll definitely be incorporated into the planning. Any other thoughts in terms of challenges or constraints or limitations that the group sees?
Another that was identified yesterday was the existing landfill as a constraint to be considered.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Reed had mentioned that, and you mentioned this earlier, that it was capped and sealed and, improvements can be built on it. So it is limiting in a sense, but it sounds like improvements can be built on it. So that's good to know. Anything else before we move on to the next question?
Hi, this is Suzette with the Office of State Park Land and Water Conservation Fund program. The site, we do have to, I don't know how much of a challenge, but it is consideration that the site is sixth encumbered National Park Service. We have to just proceed with caution, knowing that non-outdoor recreation facilities in a master plan would have to be approved through the National Park Service. And one flag I see is the community center. I believe be done, but just to note that that has to be handled carefully, and make sure the NPS process goes through for it's written in stone.
Thanks for bringing that up, Suzette. And I think we're trying to arrange a meeting between you and Mitchell to talk about that and some other parks. So that will be definitely something we'll get your input on, and we'll move forward with checking the right boxes on that.
Yeah, absolutely. The next question is regarding revenue generation uses. We've got a number of current revenue generation program uses out on site. Obviously, the State Fair and the Air Gun Club being the bigger ones. What are the opportunities that this group sees for possibly new program, revenue generating ideas? We've heard a few yesterday, but would love to hear, of your thoughts just in terms of what some of these new program elements could be, and how do we continue to generate revenue for BREC and for the sustainability and longevity of the park.
I know on the, I'm gonna go back to pickleball areas. BREC, I think it's to play pickleball in the indoor facilities that they have. I think it's a $50 a year fee, basically, which isn't that much. I think it's $50 a year, and you can play all the sites. I don't know if they do the same thing for tennis or not, or tennis is a free thing or what. I'm not sure, but again, we talking about an indoor facility that BREC has, and it's no rain, they're air conditioned, such as that, and they charge a $50 fee, I guess, help pay for the air and stuff,
Yeah, that's certainly reasonable. And I guess a question, Reed, are there current pickleball facilities in some of the parks in the BREC system?
Yes, they are. Highland Road, they play there. The park on not Jones Creek, where the dog park is, Millerville and
Forest Park?
Forest.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Got it.
When you get old, your memory goes.
Tennis court, they use it for pickleball too?
No, they have an indoor facility where they play pickleball.
Oh, okay. I've never been inside that building.
Is Brandon, you can give a full list of locations.
We have several indoor venues, mainly at our community parks, Forest Park, actually some smaller tier 2 locations like Antioch Park also. We're trying to put them in climate controlled venues. But we've recently had a kind of an uptick in pickleball taking place outside at our Greenwood Park location, which were tennis courts prior to the pickleball influence that has gone over there. So we're having a conversation about transforming that into pickleball opportunities, but I certainly agree in the south part of the parish, a pickleball venue outdoors would be a tremendous hit and a tremendous revenue generator based on tournaments, daily use, sport rentals, all those type of things. We were able to convert a couple of the tennis courts over at Highland Road in the past year into some pickleball opportunities, and it's been very popular. But there does need to be a separation between tennis and pickleball itself. It's just a different sport, a different noise level of pickleball than it is tennis. So those two don't coincide together too well.
We play well with others.
To an extent, right?
Yeah, I noticed in other parts of the country when I travel to shoot the competition air gun, when you get to areas like Florida and Arizona and parts of Texas, I usually bring my pickleball stuff with me, and I ask people about the pickleball. And like I'm gonna pick Phoenix, Arizona, or somewhere in Arizona. It's thousands of people. They'll have tournaments, and man, the hotels and everything they get full up. There's thousands of people show up to play tournaments. And I think year before last in Naples, Florida, was the first, or maybe 3 years ago. But anyway, it was the first pro level tournament where they actually won money. And that was a big draw. Of course, it was Naples, Florida. So, yeah, but
it is one
so
of the.
That's a booming thing. You kind of want to keep in the back of your mind that it seems to be everywhere you go, people talking about it, and they keep growing. Kind of like the air gun thing, yeah.
Yeah, I think there was requests also to try and get some of the courts at Independence Park to be pickleball courts.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a request and something that we'll look into for the future, replacing some of the bocce courts or shuffleboard courts that aren't as well utilized. But you're 100% accurate. Mandeville just opened up a small pickleball complex at their park. Gulfport has a very, very large complex where they do a lot of tournaments now. I think it's an over 20 court system that they have. But it is one of the fastest and largest growing sports in the nation. And it's now, it historically has been looked at for more of the older adults, but a lot of younger people are participating in the sport now, and it's really going through a boom at this point.
Yeah, and the new recreation center, should it become a reality, will have actually 3 basketball courts plus one large sort of multi-purpose indoor space for various types of futsal practice, potentially archery. Very flexible space. So there will be a lot of interior courtroom in the new, if we get the new recreation center / safe room.
Mm-hmm. Very good idea.
Yeah, that's great.
So if I could interject, additionally, other revenue generating uses included like a concessionaire to rent paddle sports equipment, similar to what BREC offers at the north end of the parish at Greenwood Park. So that's another idea.
The next question. Oh, go ahead.
Just a question. When you do the revamping of all these parks, with all this stuff, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. We've been vandalized a couple of times at the air gun range. And in fact, last night, somebody hooked a chain to the gate. It looked like a 4-wheel drive truck and tried to tear the gate down, but they didn't succeed. You have a facility look like you want to build, really nice place. Is there going to be a card, to enter, a key card, or is there going to be someone you know, a gate where you go through that has someone there, or I'm just talking reality. I'm thinking if you build nice facilities with the what you're proposing with the safe houses and all this stuff, I don't know. It's
Terry, I think that yeah, there'll definitely be higher security, but I believe turning this into a community park and creating a lot of new amenities in the after hours brings a lot more positive activity and a lot more people, and people attract people. So I think the new design and all the new amenities will inherently make the whole park safer, and there'll be much more sort of ownership of the community, and more lighting and just more activity after hours. More eyes will be on it, I think, in general. So that in itself will help a great deal and make it defensible. Not that it will be a panacea for nothing bad to happen, but it will definitely, when parks are successful, they become a lot safer.
Yeah, I have to agree with that because I remember years ago before Forest Park was redone, it was kind of sketchy sometimes. And now that it's been redone and there's lots of people there all the time, I don't feel so uneasy going there. And like right now, if I go to the range by myself, I make sure and relock the gate behind me so that people can't come in if I'm there by myself, because there's been times I've pulled up and there are people just sitting at the gate, like looking for a place to hang out of the way. And I'm like, y'all are up to no good. It's what you're doing back here in this corner. So yeah, I think if the whole park's revamped to get a lot more people out there, make it more, nicer to use, that the undesirable people will go find somewhere else to be.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, to Reed's point, security and lighting, all of these different elements, create safer environments. So I think that's going to be certainly a result and an outcome of the development process. James, should we go to the next question?
Yes.
The next one just talks about really the history. What do we know of the history of the site? I know we've talked about, prefaced that a little bit this morning. And then, what stories can be told or history interpreted through Airline Highway Park and nearby parks? Is there anything, in addition to, I know what we prefaced earlier really requires a deeper dive. But I think there's a great opportunity to really kind of tell that story through education, and other, interpretive elements throughout the park. So I guess, is there any other thoughts or considerations that we should take into account as we reflect on the history of the park and the site?
This is Michelle again. I just think you shouldn't lose the opportunity to talk about it as a part of international trade. The fur industry is not necessarily the most popular topic in the world, but it is one that really made Louisiana what it is. It made it a destination in the early 1700s. And Bayou Manchac was River Iberville, as it was at the time, was a critical part of that story. Mm-hmm. And so, since international trade is still part of Louisiana's story, I think it's a chance to talk about where we were and how we're progressing and how you come into the future, bringing the history with you from the past and just explaining. So, and it also talks about our heritage and our multi-ethnicity here that not every other state has the great benefit of having. And so I just think it's a huge opportunity from multiple layers to have an opportunity to really emphasize the historic nature of that spot of land. And not many parks have this opportunity, as I mentioned. And I think as you delve into it, there's almost no topic that you can't discuss, from transportation, both by water and land, on to today's airline highway. So that my 2 cents. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
We will. We look forward to, like I said, diving deeper into that, and I think that becomes a major opportunity and to really kind of celebrate the history of the site. So I think that's something we all look forward to digging into deeper. Anything else from a historical aspect that the group wanted to discuss before we move on to the next question?
Okay, move on.
The next question is, why is a master plan needed to make improvements? And I know yesterday we had a good conversation, just, thinking about a lot of the aspects, these different aspects that we talked about. I'm sorry, go ahead. A lot of the different aspects that we've been talking about this morning is, how do you, there's a lot to think about and a lot to consider as we develop a framework and a master plan for the site. And I think, what this becomes is really kind of a roadmap to the future as, funding becomes available to build out this park. And I think the biggest kind of takeaway from yesterday's conversation is, really the public. The public is, the constituents of the community are the ones that are really, bringing ideas forward for the development of this master plan. And I think that's really the gain that the park, the future park has, is that a lot of the ideas are coming from you all, the stakeholders and the constituents of this community. So that was obviously a big takeaway of why are we going through this process? But would love to hear any other thoughts or ideas from this group, just in terms of the master plan and why it's needed.
I really don't, kind of reading the question. I mean, it's just a common sense thing. Anytime you make a large improvement, you got to have a master plan. I kind of understand why that, but it is what it is. So,
yeah. It was more of a trick question that James incorporated in there for us, just to get us all thinking.
James on it, yeah. I knew it was James.
Every once in a while, you're right. Every once in a while, you hear, folks who aren't savvy to this and they don't want to, invest in a plan that's just going to collect dust and sit on a shelf. Why don't you just go spend this money on a backhoe operator? Well, somehow somebody needs to guide that backhoe operator and tell them where to work, right?
Sure.
It's like we've all said here, that's the purpose of the master plan. So that's why I included this question, just to emphasize our desire to make this a transparent and open and public process.
Yep.
So we'll take a look at the next question.
How can public access and connectivity to the park and the adjacencies be improved? And I guess from that standpoint, we can talk about multimodal transportation. We've got the Blue Way corridor. We've got, pedestrian connectivity or opportunities to create better pedestrian connectivity. And then obviously the vehicular piece and the deficiencies that the site kind of lends itself today from a parking standpoint. So how can we make those improvements better?
Well, okay, so obviously the Blue Way side of things is just apparent. Having access is access, but I've also been bike commuting to my day job for over 11 years now. And so I know that the CAP trail, the intention is to eventually continue connecting it all the way down. But even before that, connecting Manchac Park to Airline Highway Park, anything that basically lets people go somewhere, even if it's just walking to one end and coming back, is just of tremendous importance. I know my parents they'll drive to like near the Mall of Louisiana and just walk back and forth down that trail. So as long as there's somewhere to, for them, a trailhead, it will be used tremendously. Now, until, a walking or multimodal trail can connect, it'll always be a drive-through park for at least the near term. But having it basically in the plan that we have a goal of making it so that you don't have to drive to this, I'm looking forward to seeing that someday. And now, as far as access to the water, to or from the water goes, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that everyone I talked to out paddling, the thing that they like the best about Highland Road Park is being able to drop off their boat right there and not have to walk a tremendous distance. So I know you have that and you know that, but if I didn't say it, somebody would ask me why I didn't.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think, that's the beauty of the Highland Road launch is you can just literally drive right up to it. And we saw that the other day when we were out on site. And I think you bring up a great point about pedestrian connectivity and, thinking about how this park fits and integrates into the overall regional trail system. I think that's something that we certainly want to look at. I know there are some plans out there that consider a stop and a connection into Airline. And so that's something that we're certainly going to visit on here and look into for sure.
Yeah, I think you put it very, very well, Nathaniel. And the recently completed bike ped master plan, the aspiration and what's actually indicated in the plan is to continue the Wards Creek Trail down to and connect to, among many other things, Airline Highway Park, and having other points of access. The bike ped master plan not only includes off-road trails, but also improvements to roadway systems to help there be a really good, safer network for bike ped mobility and access. And it is a matter of, some of these are long-term goals, some of these are near-term, but those access points and potential trailheads will definitely be focused during the study in the master plan.
Any other thoughts?
On this is interior circulation, and obviously that's a objective of the master plan, is to develop a safe and efficient and effective interior circulation system. As a father, I know that I'm not concerned when I drop my sons off to attend the state fair during the day, but it's a different situation at night when I return to pick them up. And addressing those sorts of safety and vehicular access and pedestrian access and that interface between the pedestrian and the vehicles, I'm looking forward to that being improved through this master planning process.
One thing you mentioned, the safety part of it, the Agnew Range are down the south side of the range is a wooded area and a fence. Haven't really gone through the woods and looked at the entire fence, but it would help to put basically like a wooden privacy fence down that side of the range. Just as a safety precaution. I mean, we've never had any issues, but if you have a park that's, not really used that much right now until what you hope to achieve, I think it would be just a thing to make sure nobody comes through the woods, finds a spot in the fence, but it would be,
yeah, along the same lines, like I mentioned, with around the back on the water side, if they're gonna be kayaking, something along the land side too, some kind of warning and signs.
Yeah,
to do not enter.
Yeah, maybe just some signs would work too. I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's certainly important, and I think that's something that absolutely needs to be planned and considered, just from a safety standpoint.
Yeah, and the tree growth along the fences and stuff is enough that pellets aren't going to go through the fence in that way. But yeah, still want to keep people from kids will be kids and hey, let's climb this fence, or look, there's a hole, let's go see.
Yeah, absolutely. James, do we want to go to the final question or questions?
There's 2 questions. So we're looking at uses that might tolerate occasional flood inundation. Typically, that's more field sports and passive recreation.
Yep.
Yeah, the flooding that we had in 2016, yeah, that was an inconvenience for the Air Gun Club, but it wasn't a major disaster for us. We lost a little bit of stuff that was in the clubhouse, old trophies and stuff, but all of our targets are metal. We just sprayed them down with WD-40 and called it good.
And of course, the Blue Way type access, the Highlands launch is occasionally underwater, not too often, but sometimes it's gotten all the way up to the deck. And so that type of use is actually, sometimes it's easier to launch from the ball fields. So, it's kind of obvious that yes, the paddling would not be affected by occasionally being flooded, but it's true.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know what tennis courts and stuff like that. I guess you would build them up. I don't know how you could get them up just a little bit, but I don't know what a foundation. Of course, the foundation at our pavilion, which definitely we'd like to enlarge. I just kind of threw that out there. The water hasn't bothered that pavilion, concrete foundation. So I guess tennis court would just dry out like everything else. But being in Louisiana, it's not Arizona, so you're gonna, and you buy the water, so there's a good chance you'll have some flooding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now that I think about it, I think the only other issue we had at the range was a bunch of picnic tables ended up in the creek, and we had to get them pulled out along with that fridge that was in there. But I mean, our equipment for the most part was all fine. So yeah, flooding is no major issue to us, just more of an inconvenience.
Yeah, absolutely. Something we certainly want to plan for, and I think that's obviously going to be a big consideration. In terms of how does this become a functional stormwater park, and how do we actually either retain or design the park to accommodate water. So something that we're going to dig into here.
Yeah, you know, occasional rain with Ward Creek coming up, you know, into the park some, you know, I think you have to tolerate that. 2016 flood, I don't think you can build anything to stop that. Like I say, we had 9 foot of water, you know, at part of the ag. Right. So, you know, I don't think you can, for that type of water, I don't think you can dig ponds or whatever to hold any of that back. That's just too much. But again, you know, I'm 66. And that's the first time I've ever seen it. So hopefully I'll never see it again.
Yeah, well, James, I think James told us that that's only going to happen every 500 years. So.
Yeah, buddy. I'm glad he knows.
It's
I got some other
classified
questions
as a
I want to ask.
500-year event, but it's not guaranteed.
Okay, I'm gonna call you about some stock there in a little while.
All right. Moving on.
James, is there anything else is this the last question, James?
This is the last question, yes.
So this one is really, you know, in terms of amenity and programming, you know, what should this park provide that other BREC community parks currently do not provide?
Air gun range.
Yeah, for sure. And then obviously the state fairgrounds.
Sure.
That's pretty unique.
I noticed another thing, and a lot of people in BREC aren't aware of it, but they also have at that park, and I guess y'all aware of it, they have I'm gonna call it a RV, not a full-blown RV facility, but they have hookups for campers and stuff out there.
Yeah, basic water, no electricity. We have quite a few people inquire about that when they come in for Cajuns or Nationals, because quite a few folks like to travel in their RV, and so maybe a slightly better improvement on that. Because if it rains, of course, that makes that area soggy, because that's off to the south side where the original entrance for the range is located, and it's kind of wet.
Yeah, I know when they have the fair, extremely utilized right in there. And when we had the Nationals, there were several people call about camp, because a lot of these people like to camp. And they got water. I didn't know. I thought they had electrical, but I guess they don't. But
there's electrical out there.
They do have electrical there too? Okay.
It's been primarily used for the state fair, carnival, midway people to be housed out there. But as you were mentioning, for some of the air gun events, we've allowed some of the campers to be out there and stay overnight.
Well, I got, when we had the 2019 Nationals, there were some people calling about camping, what the fee was, and I didn't know, so I contacted people at BREC, and the lady just swore to me there was no camping facilities out there. So.
Yeah, I always sent them Cody's way. Cody always took care of them for the camping out there.
Yeah. Now that we have Cody Albright for BREC, we've actually made some good steps forward with Cody. He's doing a good job. But so a lot of people, they're not aware that that's out there. You know, I think that's a thing that I don't know of any other BREC park that has that. I'm not sure.
No, there's nothing else nearby, because I had looked for some more full connection facilities with sewage and everything for the folks coming in RVs, and there's nothing even remotely close. And most of the people that come in, they're like, oh, I'm only gonna be here for the weekend, so just the water was fine for them.
Sure.
Only RV location that is close is at our Far Park Equestrian Center. We have a pretty large RV campground out there with full hookups and a pump station and everything.
Okay. Where is that located?
It's on River Road, just I guess south of LSU.
Oh, okay. Pretty good little distance from where we
Yeah,
at.
it's a decent distance from you all.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So one thing, I guess technically Greenwood Park does have a boathouse with, you know, pedal rental on their little pond there. But I know pretty much every time I have a trailer of canoes out for something I'm doing, people walk up to me and ask, hey, where can I rent a boat? Where can I, you know, where can I basically go up to a boathouse and pay a few bucks and get to paddle around for a while with my kids or whatever. So we have, BREC has a few things that sort of cover that, but at a community park centrally located on blueways like this, that would be something that, if it were possible, people would probably go for tremendously.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And something that we should certainly, you know, look to incorporate for sure. So we'll definitely take that into account.
Okay.
James, I think does that round out the questions?
It does.
Well, on behalf of BREC and the design team, you know, we really appreciate everyone attending. And in terms of next steps, James, do you want to tell the group how we're planning to move forward? I know this is a very short duration. I think we've got a 5-month duration in terms of the master plan process. But why don't you talk about next steps?
All right, so next steps, we will be creating a portal within brec.org, a webpage through which we will publish updates and information about this master planning project for Airline Highway Community Park. So additional preliminary meetings with stakeholders will be occurring in the coming weeks. This was the second. Number 3 here, we'll be developing an online public engagement event that will have some interactive commenting online, polling, perhaps a graphic interface for sketching and drawing ideas on a site plan, things like that. Number 4, there'll be follow-up meetings with the project stakeholders in late September, and followed and culminating in the final public hearing in October when the final master plan is presented.
Hey, James,
Yes.
it's Melissa from HNTB.
Hi.
Do you want me to just say a few words like what we're doing with the Louisiana Watershed Initiative?
Absolutely, please.
So I was going to jump in there at the very end. I missed my opportunity, but so with the Louisiana Watershed Initiative, you know, they're taking applications for various projects, and we're working for East Baton Rouge Parish. And one of the projects that we've submitted a pre-application that's been approved is to preserve the floodplain area right around this park and a little bit more to the west. So you know, as part of that application, it's just preserving to be able to use the area for floodplain storage so that it can't be developed. Now, obviously, recreation is not, you know, livable, whatever, so it still ties in with the overall application that we're putting together. So I'm just saying there may be opportunity for some collaboration in the future if this project gets approved to incorporate both at the same time.
Hey, Melissa.
Yeah,
could you share some of what y'all may have done so far with that
I
application?
have it, Reed. I can forward it to you.
We have we've applied for watershed initiative funding for this park, and in the pre-application process, and awaiting the full application. You know, been approved for the full application as well. So it'd be good to see the overlap in that.
Yeah, that would be awesome. And I did provide our pre-application to James, so he has it. So James, if I could get that one, that would be awesome. And then we can make sure we're collaborating on any overlap.
Absolutely.
I forwarded that to y'all the other night. The application.
Okay. We will coordinate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, everyone, for participating. And we value your time and your input, and we're recording this, so others will be able to benefit from this discussion and presentation. If you have questions or concerns or ideas for the park, you can contact me at the phone number shown here on the screen. And my email address is james@franklinassoc.com. And of course, I will route inquiries, questions, comments to the proper team member or BREC staff according to your wishes and the content. So with that, thank you all.